Hello, this is Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. The European Parliament voted to extend sanctions against Russia, and now there is the possibility of other support or sanctions in the works for Russia's actions in the Black and Azov Seas. To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio by Eugene Yaroshenko, international relations expert at the Democracy House think tank. Evgeny, thank you for being with us today.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me to be here.
We're happy to have you back, especially to talk about this recent extension of sanctions, which I think everyone expected. But then there's in the works when it comes to the Russia's aggressive actions against Ukrainian Navy in Black and Azov Sea. Many people have been expecting or hoping to see more from the EU in response. So what are you seeing that may be coming up?
Well, for Ukrainian leadership, question of sanction was critical, but we see that it helped only to a certain extent. Yes, Donbass-related sanctions remain in force despite the fact that there are some countries that are reluctant to have these sanctions, these anti-Russian sanctions to be extended, but support for the sake of the European Union. These are countries like Italy, Greece, Hungary, and some others. But we see so far none of the sanctions were imposed that are related by the hostilities in the Sea of Azov or the Kerch Strait. That's one thing that Ukrainian diplomacy could not achieve. However, we see that sanctions still remains a divisive issue because there were some attempts by some aforementioned countries, in particular Italy, which has a new government which is more right-wing, more friendly towards Russia, to raise this question. But question about not extension or softening, mitigating sanctions, these attempts were not successful. But the European Union still is very divisive when it comes to its actions in response to Russia's hostile acts against Ukraine. Yes.
So in general, not, and you're speaking, they're more united when it comes to responding to Donbass, but in general, when we're looking at other escalations, there's still not a way that they've decided to respond together.
Yeah, some countries, it's particular Central and Eastern European countries, some of them, who are historically and geographically more sensitive to Russia's actions, they support more and more sanctions. Like Lithuania, they've already imposed it unilaterally. But we see that there are countries who remain neutral or silent on what Russia did, like Bulgaria, Italy, Greece, Hungary, even Slovakia. It means that there is a group of countries who are interested in having better relations with Russia, but they do not demonstrate clear pro-Russian policy. And what is more important for Ukraine, there is another third group of countries that provide political support to Ukraine, but they so far are reluctant to impose new sanctions because they are not willing to be engaged in new hostilities with Russia.
And this is kind of an issue, is this, because as we know from historically from activities with Russia, is they wait for a weak response, which allows them to feel that they can go ahead with further aggression. And so if the idea we can't look forward to new sanctions regarding Azov Sea, then what do you see perhaps in the work is some other type of support?
Well, another type of support that Ukraine can also be proud of is that the European Union realized that it is important to give more kind of economic, social, probably humanitarian support to regions that are directly or indirectly affected by Russia's actions. It's not only about Donbass. For example, recently ambassadors of the Baltic countries visited Berdyansk, Mariupol, these southeastern regions that because of severance of economic ties with Russia in the last 5 years, they suffered very much. And there is a threat that deteriorating social and economic conditions will fuel pro-Russian or even separatist moods. That's why they see a response more not in terms of hard power like sanctions or military support, but in terms of soft power like some kind of financial assistance, possibly investments and other things.
Okay. And let's switch gears then, since we haven't seen a strong response from the EU. This is not the case when it comes to NATO.
Yeah, NATO in this regard is different because NATO is a military alliance itself, and the NATO has to react when there is some insecurity around its borders. And we see that countries that at the EU level demonstrate more controversial statements and actions towards Ukraine and Russia, but within NATO there is some kind of consolidation, and the countries that are probably more interested in having mitigated or even reduced sanctions and other restrictive measures, they do not voice such concerns.
And when it comes to Russian access to the Black Sea, the Azov Sea, do we see that there's more leverage available here that could be affecting Russia versus other type of sanctions?
Yeah, for Ukraine, for example, Petro Poroshenko, some other Ukrainian analysts, some American former diplomats, they propose that Russia can be efficiently punished by such a sanctions that would cover the measures targeted at Russian shipping companies, so that none of the shipping companies that operate in the Sea of Azov or in the Black Sea could enter any European, American or Canadian seaport. But however, this prospect seems unlikely in the coming weeks or even coming months. One reason for that is that we see a group of countries very influential, such as Germany, France, let's even put aside Italy or other countries, who are interested, first of all, in de-escalation, and they may consider such type of sanctions as too much hostile that can lead to further confrontations. They are uninterested in such a scenario for a number of reasons. Second obstacle is that Ukrainian seaports, they are not so much attractive in terms of international trade. Ukraine is not so much attractive trading partners like Turkey or other neighboring countries. And the Kerch Strait, it's pretty clear that it is not the Suez Channel, the Panama Channel, or the Gulf. There is a very small volume of trade. And that's why to have some kind of risky relations with Russia for the sake of trade with Ukraine seems unlikely so far.
Well, then let's come back to Lithuania's unilateral sanctions. They made a very strong and powerful message with that. And we can actually listen to a clip from that, which tells us a little bit about what's in their sanctions.
By carrying out a military attack in Kerch, the resolution claims Russia has crossed the red line. The resolution adopted by the Seimas calls for a radical overhaul of the Western strategy of containment of Russia. The Seimas, by its resolution, suggests that the requirements for Russia should include immediate transfer of the Kerch Strait to the control of the United Nations, transfer of control over the Ukrainian territories occupied and controlled by Russia to the United Nations peacekeeping mission.
So what do you think about these particular sanctions that Lithuania has suggested?
Well, Lithuania is one of the countries that are principal proponents of strong response towards Russia's actions. It is because Lithuania historically is very sensitive, and that's why they support countries like Ukraine, Belarus, despite the fact that Belarus has specific relations with Russia. But anyway, Lithuania and Poland, other Baltic nations, they consider that they will feel more secured if Ukraine will be also more prosperous, more secured, and less pro-Russian, more pro-European, so more integrated with Western political and economic and security structures. However, this Lithuania's position can be supported by the aforementioned countries, but at the EU level, it seems unlikely for many reasons.
Mm-hmm. And do you foresee this could lead to other Baltic states introducing the same type of unilateral sanctions?
Yeah, I think Lithuania can be followed by Poland, by Latvia, by Estonia, probably by Sweden, Romania. I just mentioned countries that give the most visible political support to Ukraine in the current situation for obvious security concerns.
And just one more question. What do you think about the idea of removing Russia from the SWIFT financial system? Is that something realistic, or do you think that's just been more of an empty threat or that's been thrown around?
I'm afraid to say, but it seems more like a provocative idea. It's more regarded in terms of rhetoric rather than concrete steps, because many companies, many individuals who have some kind of financial operations with Russian entities, with Russian citizens, they will also suffer. So even if such measures will be discussed, there will be huge resistance at all levels and in all countries, because it's nowadays amid so close economic and financial interdependence, this measure seems pretty unrealistic.
Mm-hmm. And anything else that we maybe should look forward to occurring in the next few weeks or months that most people might not have thought about, or just something that you think needs to be emphasized?
Well, one of the most important topics that can affect this situation is upcoming presidential elections. The Kerch crisis and other conflict-related issues will be actively raised in Ukrainian political circles, and they will be used as a means of political competitions. And that's why political forces that advocate more decisive measures like introduction of martial law, like possible denunciation of some bilateral treaties with Russia, they have more chances to capitalize on their core voters. Issues that are related to identity, to security, to foreign policy. However, there is question if these things can work, for example, in Zaporizhia region, in Kherson region, in Donetsk region, because of the current hostilities. There are many industries, there are many people who are employed in these industries. They suffer economic losses. Many of them become unemployed. And that's the thing that there is question if such policy could alienate or align these people.
Okay, well, we're going to have to wait to see. And of course, we look forward to having you back here to give us more analysis. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting.
And that was Eugene Yaroshenko, an international relations expert at the Democracy House think tank. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned with UATV for more great programming.